Good morning, Idaho. I hope you're having a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're listening to this. Welcome to the Local Yokel Idaho podcast, where we talk about what is going on in the wonderful state of Idaho. Thank you for joining us today. We have a very full episode, starting with some issues coming up with Highway 16 extension, a report that sheds light on how Idahoans feel about the state, a bill looking at adding digital driver's licenses, how Domino's is helping the city of Rexburg, and so much more. Hey, glad to have you here today. Please join us for the morning banter where we chat with you guys a little bit before we get into it. But I understand if you're short on time and prefer to skip the banter, you can use the timestamp that's down in the description to jump straight over to the stories. For those that stayed with us, thank you. Glad to have you with us. Hope you had a wonderful week. I most certainly did with all the sunshine. It has definitely been nice to have that after all the snow and fog and all the different things, which, don't get me wrong, here in the Treasure Valley, we've definitely had fog, and I have no idea what it's like up north because I haven't been following the weather too much there. But before I get too much into the weather talk, I have John, the show's editor, co-hosting with me again today.
I am here, and I am doing pretty good, too. Yeah, the weather has been kind of crazy recently. We had a lot of snow, and then it's been nice, so that was kind of nice. I went for a walk yesterday when it was sunny, and it's been nice. These are the things I like about Idaho winters, is you get a little bit of taste of all of the different things.
Right? I have heard that from a couple people. Specifically, there was this family, and I was at a dance. I was talking to the mother, and they were from Minnesota, kind of that area, Midwest, right? And they were talking about that, how they're like, oh, yeah, here in Idaho, the snow will melt. There, it's always cloudy, and so it, like, stays forever. And I looked at them and like, I guess that makes sense, but I had never thought of that living in Idaho, that, yeah, it snows, and then either you have an inversion, it stays for 2 weeks, or you don't have an inversion, and it melts, and that's just the cycle of things. It snows, it melts, it snows, it melts. Granted, I know that's different for up north.
Yeah, no, it's definitely nice. From where I came from in Michigan, it was that it would snow, and then it would, like, get a little warm, and then rain, and then it would get a little cold, and everything would freeze, and it would snow, and then it would get warm, and it would rain, and then it would get a little cold, and everything would freeze, and so you just have, it was nasty. It was not fun.
Lord, take me out of the spin cycle. I don't want this anymore.
Yeah, it was horrible. It was horrible. So yeah, no, it's nice. Albuquerque honestly was a lot like that too, where winters it would be really cold, but it would still be super sunny, and then you'd randomly have snow that would roll through, and that would be cool, and then the snow would melt, and then it would be really cold again. And yeah, Albuquerque winters were nice too.
Yeah, I will admit, I know for all the safety concerns it usually brings and the frustration it is, I do have to admit, those mornings when, I think it's caused by like freezing rain, or it might be that it like rains the night before and then it freezes, is when you go out and everything's like encased in a perfect like millimeter or two of ice. Mm-hmm. Everything, just a perfect casing. Mm-hmm. I know the concerns about driving and walking and everything like that, and those are warranted concerns, but man, is it pretty. There's nothing quite like it to go out, and just everything is in this, and it makes everything so smooth. It's like someone went around and like sanded everything and just made it so polished, and it's beautiful.
It is. It's kind of a cool thing.
Is that something that also you guys have there in like the not Michigan, but like the Midwest area?
Well,
is that very common? I know here it's only like maybe once or twice a year.
No, it was a relatively common thing in Michigan. I know it's also a relatively common Midwestern thing. Freezing rain is just a thing that you deal with. There was a YouTube short, I think it was a short. But anyway, it was a guy making fun of Tesla because he came out to try and open his Tesla car. And there was, that 1/4 inch of ice on everything. And he was banging on the door and trying to get the handle to work. And he's like, this is a Tesla problem. And I was like, no, that's you didn't put plastic over your door. That's a you problem, man. Like, got to pull out the hair blower or else you're not opening that door. I don't care what car it is.
Or I think it was, it looked like someone probably from the Midwest that they had to like clear their driveway. Instead of getting a snow shovel or snow blower, they had just like a flame torch or something. Mm-hmm. And they're just,
I'm see like, that.
Welcome to America.
These are the things we do.
Because thankfully, for all those people out there, we do just still have a reasonable amount of freedom. You could say, and I think you can make a good case that we've lost some of it, but we have a decent amount, and that's one of the things. You can go out and clear your driveway with a massive 3-foot long flame, and it's all fine. It's fine. You're good. You might have some Karen down the street call you in, and the officer's just I'm not going to do anything. Actually, I'm just going to watch and video it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure somebody would be frustrated.
I don't know how far that would go.
I also don't know how much I would care that someone was frustrated.
Like, hello, I see my driveway. I burn my driveway. What is your problem?
Huh?
But I guess transitioning from flamethrowers back to the snow, I went out, and now that it's kind of stopped a little bit this week, here in the valley anyways, I don't know about up north, the snow has kind of stopped falling, and we've just had either rain or sunshine. And so I tried to go out and find some of the numbers and statistics for us chatting this morning of how much total snowfall in inches. So this isn't a given day, but over the length of the month of January that we've seen fall here in certain areas. First was Boise. I was able to easily find the numbers for this one. There were a couple other ones. I wanted to talk about like, not Pocatello? What? Coeur d'Alene. I wanted to do that one. I wanted to do Moscow, but it was really hard to find those numbers, and so I didn't go with it. Anyway, Boise, I was able to find the numbers. So for the month of January, we've had a total of 22.1 inches fall in Boise.
That seems like a lot.
Especially when you listen to the second number, I went and looked out. Granted, I don't know why these numbers are behind, and I actually had to like sit there and add all the numbers up for multiple days. I don't know why it doesn't just tell me the total amount, but oh well, that's a different issue. I had to go out and look for it, and I found it. But for McCall, as of January 22nd, McCall has gotten a total of 21 inches of snowfall. So Boise got 0.1 inches more than McCall has gotten for the month, which is odd. You would think McCall would get more. I think, isn't McCall at a higher altitude?
I assume so. McCall elevation 5,000. So yeah, very much so.
Okay, and Boise's is
27.
So a couple more thousand there.
Yeah,
so
2,300,000 more feet, which is that's considerable.
Yes. And then I guess for a little bit of added context then, and then over in eastern Idaho, I was able to find the numbers for Pocatello. For the month of January, they've gotten 15.7 inches of snowfall. So Boise 22.1, McCall 21, Pocatello 15. Total amount of snow from our last Mageddon, I guess you call it. I know I think KTV was trying to say that it's like the second Snowmageddon, but maybe it's just that the plowing services were a little bit more on top of it, but it really didn't feel like that. But then again, were you here during that? Like that would be 2017?
No, I wasn't here for that one. I don't know, but when I hear people talk about it, they're like, yeah, we were snowed in for, I don't know, a week or so. And I mean, there was snow on the ground here for a couple days this year. It also happened over a weekend, which means that everyone wasn't trying to drive in it. Well, I guess that's not true because it happened. There was snow leading up to the weekend. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't here.
Didn't we get someone like Friday, or was it Thursday it started?
Well, no. So schools,
Thursday it started.
Right. I remember the schools having issues. So.
Oh yeah. That segment blew up.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. But
Thank you to everyone for that.
Yeah, that one made me laugh that so many people watched that. But yeah, there was snow earlier in the week. So yeah, I don't know. I would be interested to hear someone who knows more than I tell me how this relates to Snowmageddon.
I guess I can give the description I know. Obviously, at 2017, we'll put it this way, I wasn't extremely old, so I wasn't going out to work and driving and all that, and in it, I only could see as far as the neighborhood and then hearing what my dad talked about and stuff. But the main details I remember, one, for our street, which was a dead-end street, so last on the totem pole to get shoveled and that and everything, that for about like 4 days, every time that the post tried to come and deliver to our street, right, they had to be pulled out by like an ATV one of the guys in the neighborhood had. For 4 days. Every single day they get stuck, at least once on our street.
That's hilarious.
And then when you got out to the main street, which was like a crossroads there, that was all right. But literally, it became to a certain point where me and my friends, we'd go to like the main street, and it was just a solid 3 inches of snow that had compacted so much it was just the sheeny ice.
Oh, jeez.
And so you could like go out on it as a kid. It didn't matter if you had like really grippy boots. And so you're just with your friends, almost like an ice skating rink out on. It wasn't quite as slippery as ice. And so you were like going around and you're trying to see, okay, I'm going to start on this side of the street. and you guys are trying to compete. Can I slide all the way across and do it in one thing and not face plant it on the other side? So that level. And then when you got out to the roads for a good, like, I would say, from my memory there again, being a kid, it's a little fractured. But yeah, it took them, from what I remember, about a week or something before like we could go drive out. I'm like, oh, look, Mom, there's pavement again.
Huh, that's funny.
So I don't know how that compares to you guys in Boise, because there again, I'm out in Caldwell, so I wasn't in Boise during the height of it, because I think Boise got more snow than we did out west here.
Yeah, we got a lot. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have anything to compare it to. So, and you know, like I've said, I grew up in the snow, so it's not like I was surprised by the amount of snow that was out there. I don't know. I'm probably
like, okay. Don't ask me. I am desensitized to this, Tyler. Why are you asking me these questions?
I'm probably the worst person to ask about. Was there a lot of snow? Because my answer is like, meh. I mean, not really.
John's like, you see one snowdrift, you see another snowdrift. What's the problem?
Right? Like, I don't know. I'm definitely the wrong person.
Fair enough. For everyone out there, I guess that gives you guys a little bit of context of the amount of snow that fell. You can go do your own sleuthing to figure out how that compares to different years and stuff, but we'll see if we get any more. I have no doubt as we get to the end of the month here and coming into February, someone will make an article on there, will be a report showing the total amount of snow that fell for January, because that usually happens, or at least once we pull out a winter, that usually seems to come around. But also, before we get into the main show, which we will get to, trust me, we're moving there. We do have some good news and actually a question for you, the audience, I want to pose. First part of that being a good friend of mine has volunteered to help research political and economic topics for the channel. So in the coming weeks, we're curious of what topics you would like us to cover or do a really deep dive, because thankfully with his help and assistance, he's going to help that we can start doing some really like in-depth things. Most of the times when you hear news stories with us here, I'm quoting, the Boise Dev or KTV B7 or East Idaho News or the Bonner Ferry Herald, if I'm using that right. And we're kind of basing off what they're giving and what they're reporting on, because it takes a lot of time to do that investigative reporting. But with him, we're hoping to hopefully do maybe one. It'd be really awesome if we could get to a point where we're doing 3, but if there's just a certain topic or story that you guys would love for us to go deeper on, if it's ranked choice voting, that's one of the things we've thought about doing. If it's looking at the Idaho state spending, where is things being allocated, really diving deep and doing an in-depth segment on that. Or another one that I found interested, which I know we will do, is just the question is, do we do it now or do we wait for more summery months? Is looking at the gas prices here in Idaho, because it seems in general there's like a refinery down in Salt Lake, but yet Idaho seems to have way more expensive fuel than other parts of the nation, which is just odd. So that's another thing that we're looking at and doing a deeper dive. Or if there's some other story that you've thought about or topic that you want us to get to, please email in or send me a message over on Twitter or something. Just try to reach out to us. And we'd love to hear your input on what stories you guys would be most interested in. The first story we have here starts on a Idaho topic that we all love to talk about, the highway, freeway, and traffic. Highway 16 extension, a financial crossroad for Ada County Highway District. This comes by the Boise Dev by Margaret Carmel. The Highway 16 extension, which stretches from northern Ada County through Meridian to I-84, is not just the financial responsibility of Idaho Transportation Department. The ACHD is also tasked with improving intersection and roadways near the highway. However, the cost for these improvements has significantly increased since their initial evaluation in 2021, thanks to inflation. The total cost of improving 7 intersections has risen to over $58 million. Additionally, the city of Nampa has requested ACHD to contribute between $6 million to $10 million for enhancements for 4 intersections to support the new highway. This new total far exceeds the $36 million that the state paid ACHD last year to cover the cost of the impacts of the state highway project. ACHD Director Bruce Wong has now directed the agency's lobbyists to work with legislatures at the state capitol to secure an additional $32 million in funding. Commissioner Kent Gorthorpe has suggested that ACHD should consider dropping some projects if the additional funding does not materialize, with projects on Franklin being potential candidates for the cuts. Wong has assured that staff will be reviewing all options. The intersections needing improvements in Ada County include Ustick and 10 Mile / Linder, Ustick and Black Cat, Ustick, Black Cat / 10 Mile, Franklin and McDermott / Black Cat, Ustick and McDermott, Ustick, Owyhee, Storm / Black Cat. Then as for the City of Nampa's requested improvements, include Ustick Road, Star / Owyhee Storm, Ustick and Star, Ustick Road, Can Ada / Star, and Ustick and Can Ada. Which, on this note, I think the highway that's going through is a super cool thing, independent of, what, your opinions on it. It's super cool to see that they're putting in a connection that will, I think, help a lot of people, especially kind of in the Gem State area that are trying to commute. And I'm hoping it'll take some weight off Eagle Road, because right now I feel like that's the role that Eagle is playing, is that it's acting almost like this highway will. And so hopefully once that is built, less traffic will have to move on a road with a bunch of lights, and it can move on a freeway further north. So basically, if you're driving from Emmett, besides the lights in Emmett, you're only going to have one light to deal with in theory.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that would ease up the congestion on Eagle Road, because I don't mess with Eagle. I don't touch that road ever. It's not fun.
Right.
And
I hands down personally have to say, I think 10 Mile's worse than Eagle at times. Eagle, they've beefed up the size of it so much, and the lights timing is pretty good. Rather than 10 Mile, the road's falling apart in certain areas, and it's not as wide as it needs to be for all the people that are living there in Meridian, over there, and what they've zoned as residential.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. 10 Mile does get pretty rough at times. So I haven't driven Eagle since they've beefed up at least the southern side of it up to, is it Ustick at next? Or no, it's north of Ustick now. I think
They've
it goes
beefed
to 3
it up,
lanes.
if I remember correctly,
is it
from
Ustick?
Franklin down to... Yeah, Franklin down to either Ustick or McMillan. It's been really beefed up. But yeah, any case, I guess coming back to the connector and all that and everything. In conclusion, I think this is a good thing. They're looking for funds, obviously, to try to allocate for this, because it's a big project. Obviously, there's been funds allocated where they've had to do eminent domain. I have no doubt, if you're looking at the map here, where there are subdivisions through here, right there at McMillan.
I don't know. This is one of those things where eminent domain is not great a lot of times. Gosh, I'm torn on it, because when it comes to things like this, the city is expanding, and the city is going to continue expanding. And whether you believe that's a good thing or not, it is a thing, it is expanding, it is happening, which means that the population will continue to spread. And as the population spreads, to accommodate for that, roads need to be built, they need to be widened, more infrastructure needs to be put in place so that these things can happen. I've talked about living in Austin before, where Austin believed firmly in, if we don't upgrade our road systems, people will stop moving to Austin. Guess what? It didn't work. People kept moving to Austin. We were down there. My wife and I were down there last spring, and it blew my mind how bad the roads are in Austin as compared to Boise. Well, that's because Austin's growth is about 15, 20 years ahead of Boise's. So if we aren't proactive, yeah, that's the word. If we aren't proactive with our road maintenance and road construction, then our roads are going to be like they are in Austin, and we're going to be doing all of the construction that they're doing down there, now 30, 40 years after Austin blew up, and it's a mess down there. You can't go anywhere without dealing with construction, because they're 30 years behind on their road construction and maintenance. So, having gone on that spiel about Austin, if in Boise we can be forward thinking and say, let's not be behind by 30 years, let's actually try and be ahead of things, then maybe we'll only be behind by 5 years. But still, eminent domain is rough.
Yeah, I mean, I hear people, and I've heard good arguments for why eminent domain is bad and we shouldn't allow the government to do it, right? But like most things that I argue with, and I understand sometimes you don't always have this, but if you're going to argue that the current system is bad, then you need to offer a solution. And I think that's something as Republicans and a lot of other areas, if we're not getting too political on this topic, have failed at epically. is where we'll often sit there and say, Social Security is bad. Okay, cool. What system or what alternative are you offering which will do the same thing the other thing did or achieve the same goal, right, but do it in a different way, right? And if you can't offer that, I say, okay, it's cool you can point out what's wrong, but you're never really going to get very far with policy change and getting rid of eminent domain or whatever the thing you want to get rid of if you can't offer an answer to what you should be doing.
It's the same thing we've talked about with politicians. If you're only anti the other guy and you're not for anything, you'll never go anywhere. You have to be for something. You have to have ideas. Are those ideas good or bad? I don't know. But the more ideas we have out there, then the more different ways we can think about things. Like, that's the whole idea of crowdsourcing ideas, is you get just all of the options and then you sift through it and you come up with which one the best one sounds like.
Right. But keeping with the topic of growth, on the wrong track, Idahoans weigh in on state's fast growth. This comes from the Boise Dev by Donde. According to the latest Idaho Public Policy Survey conducted by GS Strategies, a significant number of Idaho residents believe the state is growing too quickly. The survey, which has become an annual barometer of public opinion, reveals a growing unease about the pace of development and the direction the state is heading. A small plurality of Idahoans, 42%, think the state is on the wrong track, with 40 believing that it's on the right track. However, the sentiment is sharply divided along party lines. A majority of Republicans feel Idaho is moving in the right direction, largely due to its conservative leanings, while Democrats and independents express concern about the state being too conservative and the cost of living. The issue of growth is a reoccurring theme in the survey's history. A staggering 69% of respondents feel that Idaho's growth is too rapid, with concerns echoed by both long-term residents and newcomers alike. This sentiment is strong among Republicans, with 75.8% feeling that growth is too fast, compared to 53.8% of Democrats and 69% of independents. As Idaho's population nears the 2 million mark, a partisan split is emerging among new arrivals, with a higher percentage identifying as Republicans compared to long-standing Idahoans. We talked about that briefly in a couple of those stories. This shift could have lasting political implications for the state. The survey also highlights Idahoans' top priorities for the legislature: education, jobs, the economy, and notably housing. The cost of living and inflation are the primary economic concerns, with a significant number of Idahoans, especially renters, feeling the strain of housing costs on their family finances. With property taxes perceived as too high and the challenge of finding affordable housing looming large, Idahoans are calling for legislative action. The survey's findings paint a picture of a state at a crossroads, grappling with the consequences of its popularity and growth. Which, a lot of things to unpack there. We're not going to get into all of them because we'd be here for a couple hours. Which, maybe down the line, if we had a paid segment, we'd do that, but we don't, and so we're not going to. But I guess the one that jumped out to me is that when you looked at the demographics of how they looked at how long the person was here and then how they voted on the survey was interesting. New Idahoans said that the state is heading in the right direction by a 49.3% to 29.8% margin, with 21 undecided. And then folks that have been here longer than 10 years actually flip that around, with 45.9% stating that the state is in the wrong track versus 38.2% saying it's on the right track, and 15.9% being undecided, which I thought that was interesting, that if you're a new Idahoan, it's like, oh yeah, it's on the right track. I'm here. I'm really glad. I'm excited to be here, right? This is new. This is fresh. The honeymoon phase, one could call it, right? And then as folks are here for about a 10-year, then that flips the other direction. And then they're saying 45% of those people are being like, nope, this is wrong. We're going in the wrong direction. Everything's bad. It wasn't as great as when I got here, which maybe that's just human nature when something's new. I feel like a lot of that's the case. But on the other hand, I do feel like another element of that is that people are getting more connected in that community and used to, and getting maybe a better perspective of it.
I mean, that's the nature of conservatism. You like what it used to be and you want it to stay that way.
You conserve it.
Yeah. And, as a new resident, I sit here and go, but that's not going to happen. It's just not going to work. Like, I understand. I understand your sentiment perfectly. I get it. The old thing, it seemed like it was nicer. It probably was. But Boise's no longer a sleepy little city. We saw the same thing happen in Denver, I don't know, 50 years ago. And Denver or not Denver, Colorado as a whole. And Colorado became massive and this happened. So yeah, I can understand the sentiment of people who have been here for a long time, just want it to stay the same. It's not gonna.
Right.
Which sucks. But
and I mean, if I were to offer like a help or a vision to people, because I hear about it all the time. And being someone that, obviously I have not been through multiple or a ton of decades here in Idaho, but I've lived here my whole life. And I would say the place that we should look for inspiration to help with that, and I think admires that they do a great job. And obviously it can't be a one-to-one. And we talk about it often on the show off and on, but over in Europe, they've found a way that Europe is very developed compared to the United States, right? Europe has been around for a long time. There's a lot of roads. You look at it from even like a satellite or a map of the roads, right? And you about get a heart attack. Compared to the United States, when you look down, you're like, oh, look, there's the freeways, there's the thing. You go over in Europe and you're like, ah! But they have figured out a way that you can go to a certain town, right? Even if it's a big town, and you go to a certain block or something, and yeah, it'll be about the same in 50 years. Maybe some paint will change, maybe a light stand, this and that, right? But it will stay rudimentarily the same and improve at the same time. Here in America, I feel like we struggle with that concept. Usually we're like, oh, it's new. Okay, the old was bad, so we'll flatten it, and we'll put the new shopping mall or the new building or the new thing, right? And I think we can learn a lesson from that and try to maybe learn how you do that, because Europe has found a way to do that, to develop but not lose its past identity, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
As for how you do it, that's where my solution goes short, and I would say we should invest and look into that. But yeah, Idaho isn't going to stop growing, and I think any measures which, if intended well, I know some people that are working and trying to do measures like that, it's going to backfire. It's going to backfire bad, be it if we've talked about in roads in the past. It's going to backfire and you're going to have horrible traffic, and you're never just going to catch up with it ever again unless you completely, the town dies out and then you build it and then it comes back to life. Or if we're talking about housing, if you sit there and a city is like, yes, we're going to restrict the amount of houses that can be built anymore. This is the cap. That's going to go real bad because, okay, cool. The people that own there are going to love it. The property rates, I feel like, are just going to skyrocket. But for their children that want to live near their parents, it's not going to happen, because if you make scarcity in the market, like with gold, right, the value is going to skyrocket because there's scarcity. If there only are 100,000 houses that can be built in that town, the value is going to go up. That as well, I don't think is a great idea, and it's going to backfire. But rather, we should look at ways of how do we grow, but we grow responsibly. Yeah,
the last thing we want to do is turn into California, where that's...
Yes, that is everyone's objective here.
Yeah, well, and, the thing that California has done is they haven't built new housing, and they haven't kept up with public policy and things like that. So, yeah, we're going to grow. The question is, how do we grow?
Either you accept people are going to move here, and you figure out how to do that well, or you make it horrible for people to move here so they don't move here. So you have to pick what side of the rock you're going to be on here.
Right. Either move into the future nicely, or I guess just be a sad boy.
Yeah. I love Idahoans. I'm saying this to myself, but sometimes we can be stick in the muds. So hopefully we won't take the stick in the mud route. I'm really hoping we could take the more mature that, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and you can go jump off that bridge if you like. To know we're our community and we should work together to have a healthy vision of what we want for the valley and for the state as a whole.
Yep.
We will move on to our next story that is actually related to one of the main points that people are worried about and also stated in the survey for our legislatures, which is Idaho's school choice, a reality check. This comes by the Idaho Freedom Foundation by Ronald M. Nate, Ph.D. Despite this rhetoric from elected officials and educators about a variety of options parents have to secure the best education for their children, the reality is that these choices are limited to public options, such as other public schools or charter schools. Recently, as some of you may remember, the governor proposed a plan to add a mere $605,000 to, quote, accelerate, end quote, charter schools, a move that some critics have deemed almost insulting. The current system requires parents who want to opt for choice beyond public school to pay twice, once for taxes and a second time for private tuition. This, critics argue, is not a true choice, but a system designed to protect the public education complex, with children and their future bearing the brunt of the impact. In the article from IFF, 2 statistics are highlighted about the issue. First, reading and math proficiency for Idaho 8th graders on the National Assessment of Education Progress, or NAEP, has shown almost no progress in the last 19 years. Second, despite tripling state spending on schools and education since 2003, student performance has remained stagnant. All that said, there are some proposals in the works to provide some form of school choice. As discussed recently on the podcast, Senator Den Harding and Representative Horman are proposing an education tax credit bill, which would reimburse or even repay families for private school tuition when they choose education options outside the public school system. While not comprehensive, it is a start and could introduce competition for education dollars, potentially improving both private and public schools. However, until such measures are implemented, critics argue that the school choice in Idaho remains a myth. To achieve a real school choice, they say legislatures must change the propaganda and demand results for the significant investment Idaho is making in education. Which, we've talked about this a bit. The main reason I brought up this is not to beat a dead horse, but there were 2 points that the Idaho Freedom Foundation article gave that I thought were very insightful. And the first of those, which we can go over, is the proficiency scores. So we'll go into the numbers in a second here, but let's just put it this way. Idaho has spent a lot of money since 2003 to 2022 on education. And in that time, for Idaho 8th graders on that national standardized test, right, they got just about 32 to 28%. That's not great. If you look in the biggest context, Idaho has struggled as a whole to get its education numbers up compared to the rest of the nation. And this is just talking about public schooling as a whole. We just suck at it. Well, then 19 years later, we look at those proficiency scores after we spent all this money and everything, right? And we're at 32% yield and about 32% proficiency. So we've raised our proficiency by 4% over a 19-year gap and a lot of funding, which is not great. The Idaho Freedom Foundation gives some numbers here on this. I'm going to quote them here again. You'll have to go figure out where they're getting these exact numbers from, but just quoting from the article. The raw numbers are startling. This dismal outcome reveals 15,983 third graders who cannot read at grade level, leaving only 7,521 who can, which that also is very concerning because if you can't read, there's a lot of things you can't do. But then, I guess giving its full context, if we look at the money amount.
All right, so I took a little time and I crunched some numbers here. And what's interesting is that the population in Idaho was 1.36 million in 2003. In 23, it's 1.94. So equating to today's dollars, in 2003, it was at about $1.15 per person in Idaho to fund schooling. We've increased that to be $1.65 per person in Idaho for schooling. So we've increased our spending per person by 50 cents per person in the last 20 years. And our numbers have not increased at all.
Right.
So the question I had was, all right, so we're spending a bunch more on education, but also our population has grown. Is our spending growing commensurate with our population? And the answer is no, not at all. Our spending is growing drastically more than our population. If our spending hadn't grown more than our population, then I would look at those numbers and be like, well, yeah, we spent the same amount on education per kid. We're getting the same product out. No shocker there. The fact that we've increased spending as much as we have, so, we've doubled the amount of money we're spending on education and we're getting the same results. Like, what on earth? This is obviously not, spending more money obviously isn't helping the problem.
Independent of the fact of if we're looking at these numbers, right, if we're talking about getting Idaho off of the federal government spending where we're not reliant on it, I think a big start of that would be, let's figure out a way to spend that $3 billion, right, with a B, of education money on forms of education that actually are more efficient so we can decrease the amount we need to spend to get the same result, or better, hopefully. But we can't keep going either increasing spending, which we've been doing, or just keep going with the form that education has always gone in Idaho. We need something different because it's not working. It hasn't worked for, according to these numbers, it's looking at almost the past 2 decades.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like something, again, the basic sense is something has got to happen. Something's got to give here. Like we cannot just keep increasing spending, because we can look at various school districts around the country and see that the school districts that spend the most money per kid produce some of the worst students. You start talking about school districts in LA or New York or Boston, where they spend exorbitant amounts of money per student. And the students that come out of those school systems are not well-educated students. I was going to say something more disparaging, but I'll not talk about their character. I will talk about their education. Their education is really bad. And so you talk about, okay, what is the best thing that you can do to educate children? I was listening to Ben Shapiro debating a guy by the name of, by the moniker of Destiny. I don't remember what his name is. And it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. They talked about education, and Destiny's point was, well, how can we spend money to better educate children? And Shapiro's response was, family. Have a family. A mom, a dad who love each other and are living together. That's it. That's thing number one, and thing number everything else. And then encourage kids to not have children before they graduate from high school. Like, that's thing number 2. But that's thing number 2 after 10 things of mom and a dad in a household. Like, you take care of those 2 things and you've solved the vast majority of your school problems. So then the real question is, how do we encourage families to stay together? And so if we as a society, we as a government entity can encourage that somehow, that's going to make our scores and our children more educated, more than any other thing we could possibly spend money on. So I don't know how you encourage that, but that has to be the way that we go with the money that we spend in this state on education. We have to encourage the family.
I don't have much to add on that, and I would say that was a point that I kind of missed as we were going into this, because I was stuck in nerd world looking at all the numbers. And like, okay, kind of there, return on investment, right. I'm being Mr. Economics over there, which that's a really valuable point. But as we said, we were going to try to skim over this and not beat a dead horse. So maybe we achieved that, maybe we didn't. But we'll continue on with the show here. Hey there, since you've made it to this, you probably enjoy the show, and that probably means you want to keep up with all things Idaho. So don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button on YouTube, Rumble, or Twitter. That way you don't miss any of our future content about Idaho. Not to mention, if you found our content valuable and think it would benefit other people, please like and share it. We have short clips from the show on YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter, which are perfect for sharing parts of the show that you found important or valuable with friends and family. Your shares and likes can help us spread the word about our beautiful state. Also, for our audio-only listeners on platforms like iTunes or Spotify, please rate the show and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us a ton and to improve the channel as a whole. Thank you for your support and for being part of our local Yokel Idaho community. Together, hopefully, we can keep Idaho informed, engaged, and involved in this wonderful state. Let's dive right back into the show.
So coming back to local politics, but also talking about national things a little bit, we've got Governor Little sends Idaho State Police to support Texas border efforts. This comes by several sources. Governor Brad Little has announced a significant move in response to the ongoing border security debate. Idaho is sending more state police troopers to the U.S.-Mexico border to assist with security efforts. This decision aligns with actions taken by Texas, where law enforcement has placed razor wire along the southern border. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled recently that federal agents have the authority to remove the wire, and Texas authorities are holding their ground, with Governor Greg Abbott and a coalition of Republican governors, including Little, expressing their solidarity. Governor Little has proclaimed January as Idaho stands with Texas in securing the nation's border month, emphasizing Idaho's commitment to border security. That name just rolls off the tongue. This isn't the first time Idaho has been involved. In July 2021, Little sent 5 troopers to the border, and again in May 2023, he deployed 2 teams of troopers who returned with new insights on policing human trafficking. The governor's office has highlighted the importance of this mission, stating that troopers will not only assist with controlling the border, but also learn tactics to combat human trafficking. Little has criticized the Biden administration for its failure to acknowledge the severity of the border situation, linking it to the exploitation of vulnerable individuals, including children. This move has sparked a mix of support and concern among Idahoans, with some praising the governor's proactive stance and others questioning the implications for state resources and priorities. As the debate continues, one thing is clear. Idaho is taking a firm position in the national controversy on border security and immigration. Which, if you're a listener of Tim Pool at all, I only have one thing to say. Civil war.
I know that has been the topic that has been swirling in the air. I've heard it because we're recording this Friday, so that gives you some context, because as we're recording this, I am 100% confident details will change, the situation will change, and so me and John are going to try to, as best we can, limit, I guess, a little bit of our discussion, because obviously what we say is probably going to go out of date fairly quickly. And also, we want to move through this fast because of time things, and obviously this episode is a little bit more heavy than the other ones. But from what I understand, and you can correct me what you've heard here, John, the Supreme Court, in the ruling that they've done that's kind of changed the dynamics and put it in this situation, said that the feds could remove the wire. But the statements I've also heard is that they said they could remove the wire, but that doesn't mean... They didn't say anything about Texas also being willing to put it back up, that they can keep putting it back up as it's being cut down. That's what I've heard.
So federal agents can remove the razor wire. They're allowed to. But that doesn't mean that Texas must allow the feds to have access to the razor wire, nor does it mean that Texas has to take it down, nor does it mean that Texas can't put up more razor wire. So, it's just... It's absolutely ridiculous.
See, what we're going to have is a razor wire war. Part of me really kind of wants that to be in the history books when I get older. And be like, what was this, Dad? That was the razor wire war. Texas was trying to put it up faster than the feds could take it down.
It's all ridiculous. It's hilarious. I love it. I love it. I love the fact that Abbott is, I don't know if it's calling the bluff, if that's the right terminology, but
he's just sticking to his guns.
Right. I love it. I'm so happy that this is the thing that is happening right now.
Right. Which, speaking of sticking to your guns, I'm glad that Little has also stood up, because Little is little. I'll leave it at that. And sometimes he takes his finger and sticks it in the air, sees which way the wind's blowing. And that can vary, we'll put it that way. But I'm very thankful in this specific situation he's taken such a strong stance on it, and is also one of the states that is sending troopers or help, I guess, down there to the situation. I could see a more moderate person saying, well, then you're just putting fuel on the fire. I guess there's a case to be made there, but I would counter and say with matters like this, it's usually about numbers and saying how much support there is. So when, you're calling someone's bluff, you really want to have a strong hand usually, right? So the stronger you can make that hand, the more likely the person isn't going to call your bluff. So I'm glad that Little has done that. As for, what's going to come out of this, I'm not going to go too far down the speculation lane, but wars and civil wars have been started for far less than I will be willing to be quoted on.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the states that are offering their support and which ones are not. At least right now on Friday. So I jumped over to Twitter because there are a lot of those maps that are flying around. But, you have all of the southern states except North Carolina, apparently. And then you have all of the Midwestern states except for Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Kentucky, and Illinois. And then Nebraska and Colorado. Colorado clearly is not supporting this. The one that's shocking is New Mexico and Arizona have not offered their support to Texas on immigrants because those states are both wacko. But then in the Northeast, you have New Hampshire and Vermont that are both on board with Texas.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens over the next week because this is crazy. We knew 2024 was going to be a crazy year. This wasn't necessarily on my bingo card, but I mean, it's not as far off as other things that have happened already could be.
I think I heard someone give a statement, and don't ask me who it was. It was some prominent figure. It's an election year between an incumbent president and a president that we'll just say has been less than unifying. And that means that the craziness that happened in 2022 is only going to go... They use different language, but we'll just say crazy for 2024.
Something's going to hit the fan I think is the expression that gets used.
One of them, yes. But it's a family-friendly show,
That's
so
one
we
thing.
try to... Yeah. But, in any case, we didn't want to focus on this too much and give you guys, in a sense, too deep of a dive, because obviously things are going to change. There's going to be more details. Me and John might give an analysis on this or something, and then new detail comes up that completely ruins the case or argument that we're making. But, that said, we'll keep things rolling and move on to the next story. Speaking of legally related things, digital driver's license in Idaho, balancing convenience and security. This comes with East Idaho News by Rhett Nelson. In a move towards modernization and convenience, Idaho may soon offer its residents the option of having an electronic driver's license. Representative Stephanie Mickelson, a representative from Idaho Falls, is planning on introducing a bill during the 2024 legislative session that would make this possible. The proposed legislation is not aimed at making electronic licenses mandatory, but rather to provide an alternative for those who prefer the digital conveniences. Mickelson is working closely with the Idaho Transportation Department to draft the bill. ITD spokesperson Ellen Matila notes that the digital driver's license has been on their radar for several years, with at least 10 states, including Utah, Colorado, and Arizona, having already implemented similar legislation. The digital license would be added to a mobile wallet, much like a credit card information or current tickets. However, the transition to digital isn't without its concerns. Security and privacy are paramount, with Matila emphasizing the need for layers of data protection to ensure digital licenses are secure, trustworthy, and user-friendly. The digital license would allow users to show their photo ID and date of birth without revealing their home address, adding an extra layer of privacy. The bill is still in the early stages, and McNeilson is actively seeking interest from other legislatures to co-sponsor it. The response from the legislature and the public will be crucial in determining the future of this initiative. Which, our world is becoming more and more digital. I think it's kind of expected to go that way, but then it kind of comes down to the age-old discussion of physical versus digital. I will admit I very much appreciate that this is an optional thing where it's like, hey, it's a resource, it's available for you, right? You have it there, but you don't have to use it. I hope it stays that way in a sense. For instance, when you're doing legal things, it's like, hey, you can have a photo ID, but if there's something else that you need or something else that you can offer, it doesn't have to be the end all be all when it comes to photo ID. And I think this is kind of just a progression of that.
One big benefit I can see from having a digital photo ID that has all of the information attached to it is you could use that now on the internet for verification of various things easily. So
right.
Any website that requires you to put in location or age verification or anything like that, you can just use your photo ID. I can see that being a possible benefit. I'm sure there could be negative ramifications to having your info out there like that. But also, we all have our credit cards online anyway. So, and social security numbers.
That's gone pretty well.
All of that, right?
The one counter I could hear is that they would say, yeah, PayPal and like Google Pay and Apple Pay have done a good job, right? That we don't hear about, oh no, someone hacked my Apple Pay or my Google Pay or my PayPal, right? It just, I have no doubt there's probably instances, right? You can go find them.
Right.
But as we've talked about again, exceptions prove the rule, that there's probably been cases, but generally that's worked well. But I could hear the person counter and be like, cool, private industry can do that, but I don't trust the government to do that, which then it would be interesting. I don't have it right here with us. And if people out there want us to go over it, then please reach out and we'll do more on it. But it would be interesting as this bill is getting moved forward and rating, and then once it finally gets to committee, how they're going to do that. If it's that they're going to contract with like the big digital like wallet providers, so that would be like Google Pay, Samsung Pay, and Apple Pay, right? That they would contract out for those companies to make it, right, or something. And then the private sector would be doing it in a sense. Or is the Idaho government going to have like an IT department that's doing this in-house, and then you somehow scan that and Google's service or PayPal service or whatever's wallet has to handshake with it? Which, if that's the case, that makes me more worried, and I would give more credence to those people that are concerned, right? Because government institutions have a harder time being consistent and as secure.
Yeah, government institutions tend to be bad at doing things like that. I mean, just look at the problems we've been having with our accounting software.
Luma.
Yeah, with the Luma system recently. I mean, we've talked about that ad nauseum. And so, I don't trust our government to do IT things well.
Right. We'll see. It'll be very interesting. We look forward here at Local Yokel to reading the bill once it finally reaches committee, because obviously in committee there's certain cybersecurity analysts that are going to be looking at that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the job for committees, and it'll be interesting to see what those takes are on that. Now coming to our last story, as we usually like to keep it our fun one, Rexburg receives grant from Domino's to snowplow. This comes by the East Idaho News by Rhett Nilsson. So for our funny/interesting story, we're discussing a unique initiative from Domino's Pizza to help Rexburg with snow plowing efforts. In December, Domino's launch of Plowing for Snow initiative provided a total of $500,000 to be divided among the top 20 most nominated cities, with Domino's nearby. Rexburg was the fifth highest on the list and was offered a grant of $25,000, which Mayor Jerry Merrill has accepted. The grant, expected to arrive next week, is intended to assist with snow plowing efforts, but the city has the freedom to allocate it as it sees fit. The award also includes a kit with winter gear for snowplow drivers, a snow measuring stick, a road sign, a vehicle magnet, and $200 in Domino's gift cards. Kind of fitting there. Mayor Merrill has expressed that plowing the roads is a significant financial burden for the city, costing about $25,000 to plow all streets. The grant funds will save the city money during the next major snowstorm and will allow for more funds to be used for patching potholes and other repairs once the snow melts. Despite the challenges of plowing, including balancing costs and dealing with complaints, Mayor Merrill is grateful for the grant and excited to put it to use, stating, quote, "Anytime we have something that saves taxpayer money, we're always excited about that," end quote. Which, I just thought this was funny. Also, I feel like there were probably some people sitting there behind back doors having conversations that said, okay, cool, the percentage you're going to get is the exact amount it costs you to plow the city during a snowfall, that it's $25,000 to plow the streets in Rexburg, and then it's $25,000 how much the city is getting, so they get like one free snow, I guess, day. I think it's cool. I'm glad private industry, and especially Domino's, is doing stuff like this, where they're saying, hey, we want to give back. Obviously, it helps Domino's because you're giving $200 in gift cards to city people that will then go use that. They'll look more favorably on Domino's and stuff, and then the roads are able to move more, so more Domino's can happen. But like most things, I would argue in capitalism, it's not always greed, as the left would want to make out. It sometimes is mutual beneficialness.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This does sound awesome. This sounds like a wonderful melding of government and private institutions, where the private institution says, hey, we can do this better. Can we please do this? And you just pay us. That sounds awesome. I love it. I think this is what private businesses should be doing. They should be looking for ways that they can serve their community. They should be looking for ways that they can help their community. Like, this is just good. So go team.
Right. Go Domino's.
That's right.
We're not sponsored though. Okay. It'd be nice. It'd be really nice. Or a local pizza place, wink if someone's listening. But no, I thought this was just a funny story. And I wanted to put it here in the last bit. It could have been something to go in the midweek report, but I was just like, this, it made me chuckle too much. And it was just, in all the stuff that we've talked about today, and maybe the viewer is feeling this as well, it's been a little bit more of a weighty episode and a lot of stories.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I want to put something in there that kind of breaks that and says, hey, there is some hope with humanity, right? We're teetering on the edge of a possible civil war. They want to digitize your license. How could they? How dare they? We're spending so much, and what are we going to do in education? We can't get it up. But hey, at least we can look on the positive side. Look, Domino's is willing to spend a little money to help on snow clearing for one of the cities in Idaho that seems to regularly get absolutely cold. I think Rexburg, or somewhere near it over there, I was reading, was getting like 40 mile an hour like wind chill stuff during the snowy weather we were having.
Wow.
So they kind of, I feel like they probably need the help, but yeah, I think this is a wonderful story, and I think Domino's deserves some props where they deserve them.
I would agree.
Thank you for listening to the entire podcast. I sincerely hope you found it enjoyable and valuable. If we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email at localyokalidaho2022@gmail.com or on Twitter by tweeting us at localyokalidaho. With the small team we have here, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. Thank you for your continued support and assistance. That's all for now, and I wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Godspeed.